The Seven Gates of Awakening. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. Today we are unpacking a truly fascinating synthesis of ancient myth and modern psychology. We're going to be looking at a framework known as the Seven Gates of Awakening. If you have ever felt the tension between your highest spiritual aspirations and your messy, everyday human reality, this is going to be incredibly illuminating for you. We're going to explore exactly how historical ideas about cosmic bondage were eventually translated into a modern clinical roadmap for resolving trauma and finding deep psychological integration. Here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, metaphysical amnesia. Second, a modern spiritual synthesis. Third, the counterfeit spirit. Fourth, navigating the seven gates. Finally, waking up and growing up. We have a lot of really great ground to cover, so let's get right into it. Metaphysical amnesia. To really understand the seven gates, we have to rewind a couple of millennia. To set the stage, we need to look at a very specific, somewhat mysterious view of the human condition. I'll ask you this provocative question directly. What if humanity's deepest problem isn't moral failure, but metaphysical amnesia? This was the radical proposition of the ancient Gnostics. They looked at all the suffering and alienation in the world and concluded that we are not inherently bad or broken. Instead, we have simply forgotten who we truly are. They believe that underneath our personalities and physical bodies, there is a divine spark. That spark has become trapped in a lesser material world, basically pulled into a state of profound forgetfulness. The absolutely crucial point here is how you actually cure that amnesia. In Gnosticism, salvation was never about blind obedience, following rigid rules, or checking boxes on rituals. It was about gnosis. Gnosis literally translates to direct experience or knowledge of your own divine origin. It is the act of waking up. That spark is not something you can simply agree with intellectually. It is an intimate, first-hand remembering of where you came from. Scriptures and myths may point you in the right direction, sure, but genuine transformation only happens through that direct experience of waking up from the illusion. A modern spiritual synthesis. You might be wondering what on earth ancient Gnosticism has to do with a modern clinical framework. The Seven Gates of Awakening is actually a brilliant 20th century synthesis. You are not going to find this whole system in one dusty ancient scroll. Back in the 1st century, Gnostics talked about escaping 7 terrifying planetary spheres ruled by hostile cosmic gatekeepers called archons. Fast forward to the 10th century and you have classical Indian tantric traditions mapping subtle energy channels, what we know as chakras, inside the body. Then, in the 1920s, Western theosophists such as C.W. Leadbeater started blending Eastern and Western esoteric ideas together. Finally, by the mid-20th century, pioneers such as Carl Jung and modern transpersonal psychologists fully internalize these concepts, turning them into a map of human psychological development. This shift was a real game changer. The focus went from your soul trying to escape terrifying cosmic monsters in deep space to navigating 7 energy centers running along the central channel of the spine. Those frightening predators were brought inside us. They became psychological gateways within our own physical bodies and nervous systems. Essentially, a cosmic map of the universe became a highly effective clinical roadmap for trauma resolution and somatic integration. It is fascinating to see exactly how this synthesis works because it maps completely separate historical concepts directly onto one another. For instance, the Gnostics had the archon Horeos associated with the moon. Modern psychology takes that image and maps it directly onto the root chakra, making it Gate 1, ground. Or look at the sun, ruled by Adonaios. That maps onto the heart chakra and becomes Gate 4, heart. It is an incredible translation of external mythological structures of cosmic bondage into internal psychological stages of growth. The counterfeit spirit. The history of inner awakening is definitely not without its traps. We have to talk about the core psychological conflict of this entire system, the major obstacle we encounter when trying to move through these gates. The ancient Gnostics warned about something called the anti-memon pneuma, or the counterfeit spirit. They described it as a parasitic entity crafted onto your soul by the archons. Today, through the lens of modern depth psychology, we can understand this as a highly sophisticated defense mechanism. It is an artificial structure that mimics your true spiritual self. It hijacks your intellect and creative imagination, locking you into self-destructive loops in order to preserve your deepest fears and your need for control. The greatest obstacle to awakening is not always some outside enemy. Sometimes it is a highly adaptive imitation of light itself. Today, the modern clinical term for this counterfeit spirit is spiritual bypassing. This happens when we use spirituality as a shield to avoid dealing with our actual messy human reality. We imitate transcendence so we do not have to face our trauma. We use borrowed spiritual jargon, throwing around phrases such as non-attachment or high vibes, specifically to mask deep psychological pain or relational dysfunction. Ultimately, spiritual bypassing preserves the division between mind and body and completely prevents authentic emotional healing. It is the counterfeit claiming to be the real deal. Navigating the 7 gates. Let's get practical. How do we move through these physical and psychological thresholds without falling into the traps of the counterfeit spirit? We have to start at the very bottom with Gate 1, ground. This gate is entirely about embodiment, survival, and safety. Somatically, it is anchored in your skeletal system, your feet, and critically, your autonomic nervous system. The major lesson here is that true awakening must be biologically anchored. If your nervous system is constantly stuck in fight or flight mode, you cannot awaken. You have to establish basic biological safety, sleep deeply, and regulate your nervous system before you can safely process historical or ancestral trauma. You cannot build a spiritual house without a physical foundation. As we build tension and move farther up the system, we reach the 5th gate, voice. This is a profound threshold, and it demands that we ask ourselves a deeply honest question. When you speak, are you truly expressing your authentic self, or are you performing an identity? Here is the difference. The counterfeit voice manifests as performed speech. It is dogmatic preaching or manipulative overdisclosure. It uses defensive chatter and borrowed jargon to control a space so it does not have to be genuinely vulnerable. It is just noise. The true voice, on the other hand, is honest, clear, and completely unarmored. Importantly, it is paired with profound receptive silence and deep listening. When you use your true voice, words act as bridges for connection rather than weapons of defense or control. Finally, we reach the apex, Gate 7, union. This is the call to mystical transcendence, non-dual awareness, and absolute deep peace. It is associated with the crown of the head and your nervous system's capacity to handle incredibly high-voltage energetic states. The counterfeit form, however, can be extremely dangerous. It is clinical dissociation and grandiosity. If someone tries to access this unity state while bypassing the lower gates, if they skip over ground, desire, and heart simply to avoid the pain of repairing relationships, they have not actually transcended anything. They are just dissociating from their own humanity. Waking up and growing up. How do we successfully integrate this incredibly powerful high-voltage system into our modern everyday lives? First, we have to completely deconstruct and demythologize the idea that movement through these gates is a rigid, one-way ladder that we climb once and then leave behind us. It is a spiral. A single esoteric ritual, weekend retreat, or psychedelic experience does not permanently clear any gate. Changing your nervous system requires neuroplasticity, and that takes repetition, safety, relationships, integration, and time. If you tap into a high-voltage, transcendent state, you still have to do the daily, rhythmic work of grounding it back down into your physical body. Otherwise, you simply snap back into dissociation. I want to share a profound quote with you from transpersonal psychologist John Welwood, the person who originally coined the term spiritual bypassing. It perfectly captures the essence of this modern synthesis. He said, "We are not just humans learning to become Buddhas, but also Buddhas waking up in human form." The goal is not the ancient Gnostic desire to escape the physical body and flee the material cosmos. Not anymore. The goal is to bring that divine light fully down into the earth, into biological form. The most crucial takeaway is simple: waking up must be anchored by growing up. The vertical axis of spiritual transcendence and realization is useless and sometimes even dangerous if it is not structurally supported by the horizontal axis of somatic, emotional, and relational integration. True spiritual breakthroughs should not release you from your biology. They should increase your capacity to navigate bodily vulnerability, handle relational conflict, and deal with the everyday reality of being alive. Final thought: ask yourself, are you using spirituality to escape your humanity or to fully inhabit it? The 7 gates of awakening show us that truth is not found by running away from the messy reality of the body and relationships. It is found by bringing the light of awareness into every single part of it. Thank you so much for joining me in this deep dive. I really hope this leaves you with a powerful new lens for your own journey of integration. Thank you for watching. Remember, you are worth the time it takes to slow down, listen within, and care for yourself. If you found this helpful, please subscribe for more mindful insights. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself.